Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Martin Traub-Werner. I'm the founder and CEO of VetBooks, um, and excited to have you here today with my friend Peter Tanella. Um, I'll get Peter to introduce himself in just a second. You'll also notice that we've got a couple of our VetBooks team members. Caitlin's sort of driving in the background. If you do have questions or comments throughout the webinar, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm not very good at multitasking, so I can't monitor the chat and pay attention to Peter at the same time. But Caitlin will be good enough to interrupt us with questions, and we'll try and save some time for questions along the way. Peter, good afternoon.
Hey, Martin, good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. Good to see you.
Yeah, super great to see you too. Why don't we start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your practice and who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Martin. I chair the law firm's veterinary practice group out of New Jersey. I've been in the veterinary space for about 15 years now, and we have a team of attorneys here that really work with our clients all over the country, buying, selling, merging practices, serving as outside counsel, and really counseling clients on a lot of the topics we're going to be talking about. We have a team of experts here who kind of really have a specialty in almost every area of the law. So we're able to bring that platform to the veterinary profession, which we find very helpful for our clients. Outside of the vet space, I'm a father of three. I used to like to say three teenage daughters, but I'm getting a little older. I have two teenage daughters and now a full adult who I had a glass of wine with last night. All in college. Yeah, it's been an exciting ride in the vet space. I've been practicing law for a long time, probably over 25 years. But really the last 15 years focusing here in the vet space and getting to work with, people like yourself. It's a great industry, as we all know, and I feel very fortunate to be a part of it.
So, two quick questions. Number one, why did you become a lawyer?
Yeah. Uh, Probably like a lot of our clients to help people. They talk about helping, animals. I always wanted to help people. And people say, how do you got into this space? And I came into the vet space through just other connections outside of other industries who worked in this space. And when I got introduced to one particular client, and I never forget, I met my first veterinarian. I went to a presentation in upstate New York. I met him in the parking lot with a backpack on his back. And he said, hey, I need a lawyer. I'm buying a practice. And long story short, we ended up representing him to buy his first practice, bought the real estate, and then fast forward, it just grew over that period of time.
Amazing. That was going to be question number two. How'd you end up here? But turns
Yeah.
out picking up randos in parking lots seemed like
Yeah, listen, yeah, I would tell the younger attorneys, you got to be out there. And I was certainly out there. So it's good.
That's awesome.
Randos.
That's great. Randos in parking lots. Great. Okay. Oh, look at that. There's pictures of us and everything, and I forgot to change that so that people know who you're talking to. Okay. So we have like about an hour. I've set my timer for 50 minutes to leave a little bit of time for the end and give people a couple of minutes back. I like to always end a little early if I can. But there's sort of 5 areas that we're going to talk about. Business formation and tax impact, contracts and employment law, regulatory compliance and financial risk management, practice growth, and then planning for exit and practice sales, which I know is always like that's always a hot topic.
Yeah.
I think we sandwiched the kind of the exciting stuff at the beginning. The sort of the number 3, regulatory compliance and financial risk management, is kind of like some of us would rather chew glass than talk about regulatory compliance.
Right.
And so we'll get into it. So maybe let's start talking about business formation. And again, we're focused on 5 reasons why you should work with a veterinary lawyer and how it can save you money. So I want to make sure that in each of these sections, we're focused on what makes you different than, say, a non-veterinary lawyer. And
Mhm.
as we talk about business formation and tax impact, like talk to me about the difference between LLC, S Corp, C Corp,
Mhm. Yeah,
uh,
so it's
partnership, I guess, is also an option.
right. You can go back to the old days of LLPs, all kinds of different entities that you have. Uh, I want to start off, the first thing with all these topics, whenever I have a new client come to us, I always ask who's their accountant that they're working with. You want to have your team around you, your accountant, your lender, your insurance provider. Who's your team that you're working with? Because a lot of these legal issues have other implications in other area of your practice. And I also tell clients, you want to be, you just don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive in order to protect your practice financially and treat legal as an investment, not an expense. So I get a lot of times I get an email. I need to do this. What's it cost? Well, let's have a conversation about it. Let's talk about it. When clients come to me with business formation, um, I'll ask them, who's your accountant you're going to work with? From a legal standpoint, um, typically the client's going to form a limited liability company. That's the first step. Then how is that entity going to be formed? That's what you're talking about, possibly an S corporation, which most practices are formed in that way. It's a limited liability company. Then the accountant makes an S corp election, and they do that to take advantage of certain tax benefits because you can have with an S corporation, you're not subject to self-employment taxes, which is a benefit to you. Whereas the LLC provides you with all those um, operational flexibility, so you can have the best of both worlds. But like I said, I want to ask the accountant, what entity do you want formed? Because some of them will want a professional corporation that's formed, taxed as an S corporation. For us as the attorney, I usually don't have a preference because you're going to get the same legal protections, whether you're an LLC or you're a PC. It's really driven by the taxes. So I want to know, what does the accountant want you to be taxed as?
Yeah, and like it's very rare that you see um uh personal corps or PCs or anything like that. Like
Not
normally
anymore,
it's
right? You're
right
right.
because
Because of the LLC, you've got that, where you're able to have an LLC, or in some states like New York or Pennsylvania, it's called a PLLC, but it's the same thing. It gives you
right.
the flexibility to do certain things where, especially from a statutory standpoint, you don't have the certain restrictions that would apply if you were a professional corporation. It's just the evolution of corporate entities. PCs were there, and then the LLC statute came about, and most practice owners kind of lean towards an LLC.
You ever seen anybody switch midstream? I guess I've seen people
No,
kind of
I
no.
the only time I think you'd see somebody switched if they're going to bring on investors, and the investor wants some type of, a different type of entity, or even operationally in a different state, possibly Delaware. It's rare. We've come across that. It happens, but it's very rare.
I was kind of like once you're set, you're set.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Maybe I'll stop for a second and ask if there's um, any questions that anybody's got specifically about. Let's do that rather than save questions all till the end. Let's ask if there's any questions that anybody's got on business formation and tax impact. You can pop them in the chat, and I'll press forward. Um, but if people have got questions on a particular topic, we can take them as they come.
It,
So
it,
feel free to
yeah.
do that.
And I wanted to know too, Martin, I wanted to mention. So I was talking with um, a CFO for one of my clients this morning, and we were talking about structuring, like restructuring our client's practice. Our client's really successful. She operates currently 6 locations, but she has one entity that operates those 6 locations,
Oh man,
right?
I've seen
So,
that.
right, so she's built up this great organization, a lot of value in it. But now we're going to go through, and it kind of ties into a lot of what we're talking about today. No, the restructuring that's going to need to go on here with her practice, and that restructuring is going to require um, a tax implications, right? She's got a lot of debt with a lender, so we're going to have to deal with the lender in order to make sure they consent to the restructuring that we're going to want to do. At the end of the day, and we talked about a time frame, we talked about Q1 of 2026 in order to actually put out the plan so she can restructure and hopefully end of Q1 2026 while we do all the work in between, everything will be broken out at the end of the day. So she'll have 6 separate entities. We'll see who the owner is going to be. She also wants to offer ownership interest to some of her associates. And obviously, we don't want that as those associates buying into like the mothership, right? We want to kind of break it up.
Topco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's to your point in here and the importance of structuring and business formation. Again, who's your team? Who are you working with? You'd rather be proactive as opposed to reactive.
Yeah, and we're dancing around sort of, when we get to section 4 around practice growth and financial
Yeah.
expansion, like that's where we may bump up against this topic again, or we can dwell on it a little bit here. I mean, we've seen this before also where, on the bookkeeping side, somebody will come to us, they've got 4 or 5 practices, everything's in under one EIN, and it's gotten complicated because, just to your point, they want to share equity with people in different
Yes.
entities, and I don't know. I've always been you want to, on the one hand, you want to keep things simple,
Right.
and on the other hand, you want to like have enough flexibility for future growth. So like, if you're going to open up another practice, my bias has always been put it in a separate EIN and keep it run it like as its own independent entity, right? And also for exit, I imagine, and again, this is
Yeah.
topic towards the end of our talk. For exit, makes it easier to split it apart into you can value one piece of your empire, as it were.
It's a balance, right? To your point, the saying applies everything. Keep it simple, stupid, right? You want to keep it
Yeah,
simple. And you don't want to be bringing a bazooka to a knife fight. You just want to talk with the client. That's where conversations are really important. Talk with the client about what are you looking to do? What's your expectation over the next 3, 5, 7 years? Some just want to own their practice and that's it. But others have this strong desire to grow. So just this
yeah.
is all part of the conversation when you're talking about business formation and the tax implications associated with it.
I can tell you from personal experience that grow uh you can grow into like too many entities, which means too
Yeah.
many tax filings and too much structure. So it's the keeping it simple is important. All right, let's move on, Peter, to contracts and employment law. Um, you know, can you speak for a little bit about, so first of all, what's specific about, I want to talk about non-competes for sure, because that's always a
Sure.
hot topic. You and I have not talked about it actually in a while, I don't think. I'd love to get your take on, you know, non-competes, yay or nay. Um, so that's number one. And then number two, sort of some of the specifics around the veterinary context of contracts and employment law.
Yep. You know, I'll start with, every contract you don't draft well is one you'll have a lawyer fighting, lawyers fighting later on. It's almost like the old saying, the shoemaker's kids going around barefoot. Because there's many a times somebody comes to me and they put together an agreement. What do you think? How's that look? And again, you don't want to over lawyer something, but you want to make sure you have the right terms and conditions in the agreement that's appropriate for that particular piece, the scope of work. So you want to talk with the client about, whether it's the associate or the practice owner, depending on what hat I'm wearing, what we're looking at. And it's important to
Wait,
make
wait, can I
sure you
stop you
have
for a
the,
second?
yeah,
Can I
yeah,
stop you for a
sure.
second? How often do you represent the associate versus how often do you represent the practice owner?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really it's across the board because we're national, so we're getting inquiries regularly from associates who are looking to join practices coming down. Maybe I've one recently. She's coming down from Maine and she's joining a practice down in Florida. So we're working with her on the offer that she received. And then you're also working with a lot of the practice owners, and it's you see, that what I've seen, I think since well, over the last couple of years, everybody knows it. There's a shortage of veterinarians, so a lot of the associates have more leverage than they've ever had before in terms of negotiations. With the practice owner. So I have some practice owners who are little nervous about the offer letters that they're putting together because they really want to get that associate. And then you have the associate who's maybe a little more aggressive than they would have been because they know they got some leverage because that practice owner needs them. And it's a real balance in between. So our job, depending on who we're representing with the associate, the one I just mentioned, yeah, you can ask for everything, but you also you'll want to understand what the market is, in terms of you don't want to turn the employer off too, because it's the first
Yeah.
time you guys are going to be working together. So it's a real balance.
What I like about what you're saying is that, and this is so true of good advisors. I feel like a good advisor has the inside experience, right? I often say to like my financial advisor, right? It's like, how am I doing? Because you see this stuff, you see it all the time. So like I could bring you a document or a contract or some terms for employment and be like, is this reasonable? I think it's reasonable, but like, is it market? Is it
Right.
like, how does that, like, how am I doing? Right.
And if let's focus on the practice owner for a moment. The being proactive in the legal planning saves you money in the long run. And I've seen it on both sides, whether you're representing the associate or the practice owner. You want to set clear expectations in reasonable terms and conditions so it's a good relationship. And you also want to be clear about how that relationship can separate. So what happens if the associate leaves? What's the
Yeah.
ramifications to the practice owner? And if the associate wants to leave, what can he or she do after she leaves that practice? So you want to have those conversations with the client up front so there's clear expectations, when that if that relationship ends at some point in time, which I think that's where you get a lot of calls on.
Yeah. I don't think it's horrifically risque if people who know me and my particular style to say it's like, you want to document how you get into bed together and how you get out of bed together.
Right, right. And it kind of leads into restricted covenants, non-competes. It kind of segues right into that because I can't tell you. It's probably next to there's not the associate shortfall. The next biggest comment I get all the time is, "Oh, non-competes, they're not enforceable anyway," and especially with the recent ruling from the FTC last year. And we always say it depends. Depends what state you're in.
Oh,
One,
Peter, that's such
yeah.
a lawyer comment.
Right, but it's I'm doing my job. That's what they're gonna do. Right? I know. It depends, and also depends on if you're representing the practice owner, what's the culture of that practice? Some practices, what is that practice? Is it just doing emergency medicine? Well, if you're emergency medicine, you may not need you're not going to need a non-compete because you're not developing those relationships with the client. So what's
Oh, yeah,
your
that's a good
area?
point.
What's the area of your focus, right? What state are you in? And then what are you looking to accomplish? And I always say to clients, well, it depends on to the terms that you're putting in place. In an employment relationship, usually the term of restriction is 1 to 2 years at the most. Okay. And then the radius where you're not allowed to compete in, it's got to be reasonable. So I always say, well, okay, if I'm at your practice, where are you drawing your clients from? Where do you want to know if you're your practice, so the practice owner, where you're drawing your clients from? So, because if you're in Manhattan, it may be 3, 4 blocks to the to the east, But if I'm in Wyoming, it may be a 15-mile radius. It just depends on where the practice is located. And then it further depends on the laws of that state, where some states don't, are now prohibiting them. So it's very fluid, depending on where you are and what the expectations are of the parties.
I've paid that close attention. Would you say about like the lion's share of states, call it by population, not, not by sort of actual number of states, so that, Florida and Texas have more weight, for example, than in Idaho.
Mhm.
Um, uh, would you say the vast majority of the population is covered by states that say non-competes are not valid?
No, I think it's the opposite. I think the vast majority are still, they are enforceable. Um, in the states. I think it may be leaning that way, but the vast majority, I think they're still enforceable, depending if they're written in a reasonable manner. Like if you go to, you get a Blue Pearl contract, almost every Blue Pearl contract I get in front of me from somebody who's looking to leave them, and I'm not picking on them, but it's very familiar. The radiuses are really broad, tens, could be, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles in the terms of the longer. And a lot of times the clients don't want to challenge it because it's expensive because they know they'll fight. So
Right.
that's where you want to get the lawyer involved up front. So when you get
Yeah.
that associate employment agreement, you're going to go work for a company like Blue Pearl. Understand what the expectation is, because if you want to leave at some point in time and go join a practice, start your own practice, what can and cannot you do? You want to deal with that up front.
You're reminding me why it's so important to have good advice at the beginning of relationships. It's like,
Yeah. And
and I
if,
also,
if yeah, and if you have a lawyer or your accountant. A lot of times we get the accountants are the first one. Hey, you should have a lawyer look at that. Just like I told you at the outset. Yeah, we can help you out, but who's your accountant? Because
yeah,
that's you really want to have your advisors around you, Martin, to kind of help
yeah.
you through that process.
I also really like what you said on the non-competes about the proximity rule. I mean, if you use objective criteria, right? Like you just pull a client list out of your practice management system, draw a circle around sort of where 80% of the clients live and say, look, this is my area. Anything outside of this, if we break up, you can have or you're welcome to, then, that seems to meet the reasonable threshold. So that's pretty cool. I made up the 80% number, but it's
Yeah, no, but
defensible.
listen, I've gotten contracts in front of me from practice owners that are, they're really broad and there is no the restrictions. Um, so just on both sides, whether you're a practice owner, you're associate, you should spend the time and the money up front to have an attorney review it. I mean, and I always recommend an attorney, going back to your earlier comment at the outset, in the industry. In this industry, we're really fortunate that there are a number of lawyers who work exclusively in this space. Fortunately for me, I'm good friends with all of them. It's so you understand what we'll call as market, I just said earlier, because you're in
Yeah.
this space, you're not asking for something that's unreasonable, because at the end of the day, you want to get whatever we're doing done for the client. So you don't want to be unreasonable about what you're asking for.
Yeah. Yeah. I always say like, okay, here's a wildly self-serving comment, but here's why you want to work with somebody in this space, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'll leave it to our attendees if they've got any questions on contracts and employment law. Um, Tell me a story about where you've seen a contract, an employment contract go horribly wrong, Peter.
Horribly wrong. I think just generally, Martin, where clients come to you and whether it's a practice owner, the associate, and they want to do something and they can't. And they didn't realize they can't because of the agreement that they have. And let's say pick on the associate who joins a practice. Um, Obviously, I'm cognizant of the fact you're going to join her. You're a young associate. You may not have the financial resources you think to hire an attorney, but I think it's money well spent, and it's not a lot of money in order to have that reviewed, because eventually, if you want to leave that practice and go do something that you want to do, you may be you may be disappointed that you're not allowed to do that because of the agreement you signed up front. And similarly with a practice owner, the associate leaves and they're like, well, I have a contract, and they realize that the contract is no longer valid and enforceable because they put something together, maybe they found on the internet, and it didn't have automatic renewal periods in there. So it really just, it's important to have somebody who understands what to do and review them so you can set the clear expectations. So to your point, you're going to separate what happens.
Yeah. All right, let's press forward a little bit into a super non-sexy topic of regulatory compliance and financial risk management. So, the broad comment here is just around the legal and financial consequences. When we talked about this topic, it's sort of the medical record errors, client disputes, state board actions. Do you get involved in that stuff much?
So our firm does. I don't as much. More my regulatory team will get involved in those types of issues. Again, that's the nice thing about the platform that we have. We have a number of experts within their area of law that we bring into the veterinary space, which is great. I do, advise clients. I hate to say it as a lawyer, document, right? You can't over communicate with the clients and with your staff. We've been getting a lot more inquiries lately from from pet owners who want to sue their veterinarian. We don't do that. We don't
Oh,
pursue,
shit.
we don't do that. But and I was thinking about it in preparation of this webinar. Why is that? And we get at least probably one a week or one every other week, some disgruntled pet owner who's upset about their veterinarian or the practice that they're going to. And maybe it has to do with, I don't know, poor communication. People are practices are maybe not as well staffed as they want to be, dealing with the pet owners, and also maybe the financial environment that we're in right now. Things are expensive, so people are upset. So you can't I can't emphasize the amount of over communicating, because it's like the same story. I went there, they told me this happened, and this happened to my dog, and I'm really upset, and now I want I want to get something. I'd say we just don't do that type of work. But you're seeing a lot more of it, and I think it's a perfect storm with just not communicating good enough, maybe training with the staff, talk about communicating with your clients.
Do you get into the defense at all?
No, we don't, because typically what will happen is the
It's
practice owners,
it's litigation,
but
really, eh?
but the practices have insurance, so they get a claim, it goes right to their insurance carrier. Right.
Of
It's
course.
unfortunate. Unfortunately, it's a cost of doing business. However, if to your point, in terms of regulatory compliance, um, you know, the medical records and client communication missteps, how they can lead to financial and legal challenges. If you can avoid them, you want to be able to avoid them. Because you get these heated
Yeah.
client disputes it's just a waste of time and money for everybody.
Yeah. And sort of outside the scope of this conversation, although, note that it's something on my mind that we'll bring to in a future webinar. It seems to me this is a really good argument for some of those scribing tools that I know you don't get particularly involved in, but
Right.
the scribble vets, covets, the scribe notes of the world. Like if you have like good record, like good scribe notes, sort of AI driven, and I imagine that would provide a layer of, it's not complete protection, but it's going to be better off than any kind of notes taken at the end of a shift kind of
No, I
rough.
agree, because it's the poor record keeping or the miscommunication that will lead to the client dispute. So if you're a busy practice, which most of them are, if you have a tool that can help you and it's going to help you with your record keeping, I think it's, that's great. And it's similar, we talked about it, Martin, offline, with telemedicine, and we all know how that's grown, dramatically. And we get some inquiries about that. I've some clients who are looking to explore that. And, a couple of my partners deal more in that area than I do. And you just want and it's kind of like the, restricted covenants. It's a really evolving area of the law. I mean, you really, depending on the state that you're in. But you want to make sure you have, a valid veterinary client-patient relationship with the clients that you're dealing with. And again, documented, follow up, record. So if there's an issue, the client doesn't forget, what you told them, during that consultation. But it's pretty fluid.
Kind of terrifying. Like as we're going through these, I'm like, we're sort of halfway through the list, and I'm kind of like, wow, there's a lot of sort of, there's the structural, there's the employment, there's the client relationship, there's the, it's like, man, there's a lot of elements here that kind of
When you think about it,
got to keep your eyes on.
goes back to your advisor. So from an accounting standpoint, lining you up from from taxes. We didn't talk about insurance, but insurance, one of the other issues, we just co-authored an article with IT Guru that's going to be coming out in today's veterinary business.
I love
about
Joe.
about cyber insurance, and the need for it, because the cyber liability that every business, this is not in the veterinary industry, is dealing with all these, all these outside third parties trying to ping the practice. So you have your tax advisor, your insurance advisor, obviously, your attorney. That's where you need your team there, because you want to practice veterinary medicine, but you're running a business at the same time. And a lot of where we spend a lot of our time too is in human resources. That's where HR. Some of our that's another big issue that comes up quite a bit. But it's not meant to be scary. It's just more to be, let's use the word, proactive at the end of the day. It's great to go and own your own practice, and you can be very successful. And just like any other business, there's things you need to be aware of, and that's why you hire advisors. Just like my wife took my dog to our veterinarian today. I saw the ping come up on my Amex. I saw the bill come up. I'm like, good. I know she's in good hands. That's what you do, right?
Yeah. Hey, going backwards now for a minute, we talked about sort of HR and employment contracts, and we spent a lot of time much of that time on non-competes and both the employer perspective and the associated perspective. But do you have any good HR stories?
So one, you want to have a good employee handbook.
I'm gonna back this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna back the slide up. Oh.
You got it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. You want to have a good employee handbook. I always say, use the analogy of the Super Bowl. I really don't watch sports as much as I used to, but everybody sits around pretty much on Super Bowl Sunday want to watch that game. So you think about if the Super Bowl took place and there's no rules in the Super Bowl, everybody be bumping into each other. The game probably wouldn't be as fun as we're watching it. Your practice is the same thing. That the handbook that you have, that employee handbook, it's just communication tool from the practice owner to the staff, and it sets the expectations. You also want to be able to rely upon that as the practice owner. If an issue comes up, and we had a case last year where the practice manager was dating one of the technicians. Two of them broke up, and then the practice manager who controlled the schedule, what did she do? She started really playing around with the schedule, and that technician, their hours obviously got diminished, and it became a problem. So our client had to reach out to us. We had to kind of step in there to remedy that situation, so our client doesn't get faced with maybe a discrimination or some type of harassment claim. And you also want to have, at a minimum, an open door policy in there. As a practice owner, you want to clearly set forth that, hey, I'm here. If there's an issue, come to me. If there's any issues with the practice, I have an open door policy.
You have to explicitly write that?
Well, you want to have an open door policy because let's just say at the front desk, the FedEx guy comes in and he's doing something inappropriately with who's ever at, the front desk, and you're not aware of it as a practice owner. And all of a sudden, that person quits their job and they know you get a claim filed against you. And this is just spitballing here. Well, the first thing you want to do is be able to look at that handbook and say, well, I have an open door policy. You are being harassed. The harassment policy says, if you have a claim or there's any issues, come talk to me because I have an open door policy. It gives your attorney, it's not lock, stock, and barrel, but it gives your attorney the opportunity to argue in your defense, saying, hey, you didn't take advantage of. How was I supposed to know? So how was I supposed to help you remedy that situation? And that's why you want to have these policies set forth in your handbook and use it as a tool. Far too often I find clients will just grab one off of the internet that's not applicable to their practice or to their state. And that's why you want to spend the time and money up front on a good handbook, so you're not spending more time and money on the back end trying to be reactive to a situation you could address up front.
So like, I totally know that you're right. Like, fun fact, I started my career in human resources. And I totally know you're right, but I hate it so much that we need to like have these handbooks as defense mechanisms. It's so frustrating.
It is.
I know you're right. I just hate
Yeah.
I hate the truth of it. But like, why can't we just all be adults?
Yeah, well, when you're running a business and there's money involved, and we can all be adults when things are going well. But when
Yeah.
things don't go well, and an employer relationship, we're going to talk about partner relationships, in any relationships, we all know it's human nature. When things don't go well, people start pointing fingers. And if you get a lawyer involved who maybe is hired on a contingency basis, and you're your well-run practice making, have, the deep pocket, you run into a problem.
Yeah. So, um, having not surveyed our participants and for people who might view this webinar, do you want to just spend 30 seconds on the difference between retained and contingency?
Yeah, and we don't really get into those types of matters. It's more, you see in employment matters, if an employee, there are what we call like personal injury lawyers. There are what's called employee plaintiffs lawyers out there, where they only get paid if they're successful in the claim that they bring against the employer. So we would typically be on the side of representing an employer in those types of situations. But there are attorneys out there who operate on contingency fees. So in that situation where, the technician and the office manager were kind of going at it, if our client didn't step in and she knew that activity was going on in her practice, and then all of a sudden that technician quits and goes hires a lawyer, 9 times out of 10, they're going to try and squeeze some money out of that practice owner. It's unfortunate in the times that we live in, but that's what you're looking at. That's why you want to document, be proactive, so you can avoid those types of issues.
Yeah, I got a lot of words. I got a lot of words for that.
Yeah, I know you do.
None of which are polite. Okay, let's spend a little bit of time on practice growth and financial expansion. Talk to me about. I want to cover at least two things: the financial and legal aspects of adding partners or selling equity is sort of one. Like, how do I start sharing the pie, and then any real estate considerations as well.
Sure. So really sharing the pie, and going back to my client who has the one entity in 6 locations. And we're getting a lot of clients. You know what's great? I think as of January of 2023, the associate buy-ins are really really have expanded. Prior to January 2023, obviously everybody was aware of, the corporate consolidation was very strong market. You still see corporate consolidation going on, but a lot of our clients are either buying into practices, or we have practice owners who are calling us and saying, hey, I want to create a structure where my associate can buy in. Or some of them even say, I want my practice manager to be able to buy in. I want them to share, in what we're building here because they've been an integral part of it. So it really depends on let's say, for example, the practice owner, what they're looking to do. And the first step in anything, if you're going to look to have somebody buy into your practice, you got to understand what the practice is worth. So you need to get a updated practice valuation. That's the first step that you would end up doing. And then you can talk about a buy-in at some point in time. The client I was talking about earlier, talking with the CFO this morning, we're trying to figure out, okay, in order to structure buy-ins for a couple of the associates and maybe the practice manager, we got to reorganize first. And then we're going to figure out, our client's going to figure out what practice does she want them to buy into. For reorganize, separate everything, get each one of the locations valued. So then let's just say practice location A is worth $1 million. If you're going to buy in at 10%, you know how much you're going to have to come up with. How is that going to get financed? And there's lenders out there in the industry that can help you finance those. So it's a process with that. But it is very active right now. And I enjoy those types of transitions the most because you're seeing the parties come together to be a part of an already successful practice. And it's rewarding at the end when either the associate, finishes buying in, or the practice owner has, been able to have their associate, the associate that they want to maybe succeed them. It is rewarding.
I agree. I love that because it's sort of the passing the torch, sharing the wealth. Like I really love those scenarios. And at the risk of being like focusing on the shit that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Have you seen that stuff go wrong?
Yeah, so let's yeah. Again, the basic poor communication. Things go on, or
Right.
maybe, or having the wrong representation. I had a client a couple of years ago. She was going to buy into the practice that she'd been working at for 5 years. She was my client, and the practice owner and her had a great relationship. The practice owner ended up hiring an attorney, a local attorney who the practice manager knew from a golf club. It was just a mess. And that attorney just really, I felt really almost ruined a good thing. Because he didn't understand what they were looking to do. He just really, fortunately, our client and the practice owner had a great relationship where they could overcome the aggressiveness of that attorney, and they could talk, say, listen, this is what we want at the end of the day. So yeah, I have seen that go sideways, unfortunately. And even too, where you buy in and you have a poorly written partnership agreement. One other thing I'm seeing a lot of now, which I didn't see prior to 2023, the last, I'd say 24 months, we have a lot of practices where you and I are partners, Martin, and maybe we don't have the best partnership agreement in place. And all of a sudden I come to you and I say, you know what, Martin, thing with COVID, all this stuff, I'm burnt out. I don't want to do this anymore. I want out. And then, they want to separate, and you don't have that roadmap because you don't have a good agreement in place in order to separate. So it's, again, time and money on the front end to avoid, time and more money on the back end. Because if you have a good drafted partnership agreement, it's like a prenuptial agreement. You set the expectations about how the practice is going to be managed, how the major decisions are going to be made. And then if you guys want to separate, you're agreeing up front, well, you and I are friends. We're going into this. We're going to do great. And how are we going to separate? If I want to leave, you just follow the roadmap in the agreement. There's a mechanism in there that should be able to, one of you wants to get out, you should be able to get out through the mechanism that you guys agreed to at the front end. I have a couple right now where they're poorly drafted, and it's spending a lot more time and money separating than it should be.
I think you and I have a client in common, actually, where that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's the case. Yeah. And it's funny, I have had operating agreements and partnership agreements in my life, and they always take forever to to draft and finally sort of settle, because when you're working every day and things are good and nobody's, upset or retiring or having a life transition or anything like that, there's sort of no burning platform to get that work done. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden it's like, oh, having a life-changing event, or somebody gets sick, or somebody wants out, or whatever. And all of a sudden it's sort of like this thing that maybe we had a draft and we sort of maybe commented on back and forth, or we notionally have some ideas of what we want to put in there, but we don't actually. I feel like the partnership agreement is like one of those that kind of requires a little extra push and investment, because it's sort of a nut that you're storing for a rainy day. It's kind of like one of those hygiene, sort of those good hygiene things.
I think going back to surround yourself with good advisors, if the client has good advisors, somebody like yourself, a good CPA, there's insurance agents in this industry that just work in
Yeah.
this space. If they have good advisors, because they're asking the same, we're asking similar questions, they're saying, hey, you should really go have a lawyer work, and so you guys got a partnership agreement in place. And this is what I've seen in my experience with some of my clients. That's where we get a lot of those referrals, because their advisors are saying, hey, spend a little time and money up front to get this in place so you don't have a problem on the back end. I have three right now where the partners are separating, and they were on really great relationships at one time. And it's unfortunate, because you should be able to separate and go your separate ways if you want, and don't be upset or frustrated with your partner because you're fighting over a poorly drafted agreement.
I know, but it's money and time. Like, I don't want to spend the money and I don't want to put in the time. But I
Mm.
suppose what you're saying is it's going to bite you. You haven't said it specifically like this, but it's going to bite you in the ass unless you
Well,
put in
not
the money and
always,
time up front.
not with everybody, but if you're talking about, you know, if you're talking about, things that you should do to save you time and money, that is one of them, right? Because I can tell you the time that we're spending now to have these parties separate is a
Yeah,
lot more time now, because we don't have that roadmap in front of us. Whereas a good drafted agreement, there'd be a mechanism in place for the separation, how notice is given. There'd be a mechanism in place how the purchase price of the practice is valued. You have language in there about going to get a valuation from Simmons, for example, or some
yeah,
other professional in the industry. You use that valuation, you strike the price, you see what your percentage is in the practice, and you have a mechanism to get out. Without all of that,
yeah,
you're leaving room for attorneys to get involved and take positions, or partner. People forget. You know,
yeah, yeah,
it's just human nature, unfortunately.
yeah. You're reminding me about like the analogy that I'm thinking in my head is like, oh my goodness, there's all this stuff that I have to do to maintain my house, right? I've got to get the gutters cleaned. I've got to clean out the lint thing from the dryer vent cleaning. I got to change the furnace filter and all this stuff that I should do and have to do, but never really want to do. I kind of feel like we're talking about a lot of those same things. It's like, make sure you have a partnership agreement, make sure you've got good employment contracts, make sure you have an employee handbook, you know, make sure you have a practice valuation. It's kind of like all this stuff, which, by the way, none of which is time spent taking care of our clients and patients, and yet
Yeah.
stuff that we got to do. It's really not sexy. No wonder people don't like you, Peter. I mean, I like
Yeah,
you.
listen, it's
I mean, lawyers in general. You're
no,
lovable.
listen, at least that's another comment I get once a day. There's always some lawyer joke. I think I heard one this morning at 10 on that call. So this is my second one, but it's
All right.
okay. We're the good kind of lawyers. We want to help the client. I know you have the lawyers who go to court, right? We don't do that type of work. You need them,
Yeah.
but we want, you want to put things together. We want to be deal makers, not deal breakers. You want to put things together so the clients are happy. And then if they want to, separate, you have a mechanism to do that. Right? And so, and it's not lost on me, Martin, what you just said, the way you just talked about all these things. And most of our clients, they're super busy. They're practicing all day long. So the last thing they want to do is come back, there's a computer at the end of the day, and I got to do this, I got to do that. So you want to you want to work in a manner where your advisors where it's manageable. Sometimes it's having that great practice manager, or just setting expectations, budgets around each piece of work. Maybe you can't. Maybe you don't do the partnership agreement immediately. Maybe you put the handbook first, or you do one or the other, but you budget over a period of time what it's going to cost in order to do that, and then a time frame associated with that, and you can move the project along.
That makes sense to me. Hey, I said we would try and end early, and here we are. Like we've got 10 minutes left before the
Mm,
top of the hour, and we got one more topic left. Maybe we touch this one
yep.
quickly, then I'll again leave it open to the attendees if they've got any questions. Caitlin's monitoring the chat. But why don't we just touch on quickly planning for exit and practice sales? I had this thought, Peter, that like planning for exit is like a 10 or 15-year project. And so many of our clients come to us on the bookkeeping front. I had one just last week. Somebody came to us and was like, I want to exit within the next 12 months. And
Yeah.
I gotta get like I gotta get my books cleaned up. I gotta like I'm like, boy, you gotta have like at least 3 years worth of clean books to really do a proper exit. And some of all these hygiene things that we're talking about. Do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, I mean,
Sure.
obviously valuation, but
Yeah.
planning for exit and practice sales?
You hit the nail on the head, Martin, with the time involved. And when I first started practicing in this space 15 years ago, I think the rule of thumb was maybe you want to be start planning 3 years before you sell. Now, you talk to almost every advisor here, they're going to tell you 5 years or longer. Because like you said, you want to have clean financials, solid contracts, minimal legal exposure, and planning 5 years ahead. You get a valuation done of your practice at that point in time, because that valuation is going to give you the good, bad, and the ugly. Maybe there's things that you need to fix. Maybe you're running certain things through your practice that you shouldn't be, so you can clean up your financials if you plan ahead of time. And you also want to consider, and Martin, I have the majority of our clients come to us just like you said. I want to sell. When do you want to sell? Oh, at the end of the year. Well, where are you in the
Yeah.
process? Oh, I'm just started. So we can't get the message there out there enough to be proactive. You should really run your practice as if you want to sell it, in the next 6 months. If you're running it like that on a regular basis, you're prepared at any moment to sell it. But most aren't because they're busy, running a day-to-day practice. And also tell them or advise, when do you want to, what do you want to do? So if you're going to sell it to a corporate buyer, at a minimum, you're going to most likely stick around for 3 years, if not five, right? So if you're 65, and I have a number of clients who have been older than that, 70 years old, and you want to get out and you don't want to practice anymore, if you really want to maximize the value of your practice, that corporate buyer is going to want you there for a minimum of 3 years, at least to five. Sometimes, if you built a practice where you've got a multi-doctor practice, 4 or 5 doctors, and you are serving as the medical director, and you're not really practicing veterinary medicine, and you're not producing, you may be able to get out sooner than that, maybe a year or 2 years. But normally, rule of thumb is 3 to 5 years after you sell. If you're selling to your associate, that's different, because then you have more of a blank canvas in terms of what's the deal you're going to work out with your associate. So it really depends. But it goes back, Martin, to planning. And what do you want to
Yeah.
do? What's your
Yeah.
goals? What's your long-term goals?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I had a, a, a leader that I worked for early in my career who said, my house is always for sale. And then he translated that to my business is always for sale, which translated to like always have your house in order, right? Like always have
Yeah.
everything like paperwork's clean, contracts are clean, valuations clean, like everything's sort of clean. Um, and just sort of be realistic about what that takes. Uh,
Yeah.
Peter, I love this conversation. I can't believe how quickly the time flew by. And I'm super grateful. Maybe give you the sort of last word here on, going back up to the top topic for the day. Um, uh, leave you to sort of leave us with your last thoughts on sort of why a veterinary lawyer and how it saves you money.
Yeah, I'll leave you with, like I said earlier, your team, having your team around you. In this industry, I think we're pretty lucky that there are professionals like myself who just specialize in this industry. So you understand what the issues are. And that's important because you're not spending time and money on issues unnecessarily. And then surrounding yourself with the right team. Anytime I give a presentation, one of the first slides on any of my presentations is surrounding yourself with the right team for all the reasons that we talked about earlier. And then again, just like I said earlier, treating legal as an investment, not an expense. I get it. You don't have a blank checkbook, but when clients call us, I always say, okay, what do you need this to do? And to the extent that we can, well, we're always going to give a budget for a piece of work because you're a business owner, you need a budget, but you want to treat it as an investment because you're investing in your practice. And based upon what we just talked about over the last 50 minutes, all these issues that could arise, you want to be proactive and hopefully address some of these issues so you're not reacting later on.
Yeah. It's funny. I talk a lot about how veterinary practices are wildly complex businesses, right? Like if you're just selling, if you're just like running you're an electrician or a plumber, or, you have sort of services and a little bit of labor, a little bit of materials kind of thing. But these businesses are wildly complex, right? You're not just a general practitioner, you're a pharmacist, you're a dentist, you're a dermatologist, you're, a surgeon, and sort of all the complexity that comes with these businesses. I like you, I'm thrilled that there's a sort of an ecosystem of professionals that specifically support the veterinary industry.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the time today, Peter. Thank you. You gave me a lot. You gave me new stuff to think about, and why I actually love lawyers. I know they get
Yeah.
a bad rap, but great lawyers are really great and
Yeah.
really important.
Listen,
Really
Martin,
important
my
people.
partners and I joke. There's some lawyers that I don't like either. There's a lot of them I don't like. So I get it. It's okay. I got thick skin. Yeah. Thank
We
you
love
for
you,
having me.
Peter.
It's great being your
We love you.
guest. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. We've got a minute or two for questions if there are any. I know Caitlin's put a link to the VetBooks website and to Peter's Just Vetting podcast. Peter and I are both very easy to find, and we're super happy to answer any questions offline if we can be helpful to you in any way, shape, or form. I think we'll probably leave it there and say thank you to those who spent time listening to our talk. And Peter, I'll look forward to seeing you on the next pass.
Sounds good, Martin. Thanks again.
Thank you, everybody.